A Drummer Boy Christmas. I love it. Okay, so let me tell you what I first thought when I first listened to it.
Yeah,
First of all, I love it. There. Second, you guys
that's
can
good.
like.
You left me in suspense there for a minute. Just,
You guys can sing. You know what I mean?
I appreciate you saying
No,
that.
there's some really great vocals on there. So give me the whole, like, why you decided to do a Christmas album now.
Well, you realize, I mean, we've known each other for a minute now, but I don't know if you realize the full extent of our history with Christmas music. So we started as a band in 2012, and Gail, we were just so excited that we got to travel. I mean, it was 15-passenger van and a little trailer, but we were so excited that we got to travel in those kind of that early season as a band that we just determined that Christmas, like, we're going to do a Christmas tour. Like, let's just do a Christmas tour. We had no Christmas single, no Christmas album, nothing. So we ended up kind of shoving ourselves in this factory, old factory, for 2 days, and very like fire from the hip Christmas rehearsals, which is where we came up with actually some of these renditions, namely Little Drummer Boy. And from that day to this, you know, we've released singles and EPs and live records. We've done Christmas tours, but Little Drummer Boy has always been, and Christmas music for that matter, has always been something that has just been this really charming part of what we do. And not only that, but it has actually sonically even helped, I think, craft the template, the sonic kind of template of the band, because it was just so early on. And so we started talking about it a little while ago, but particularly when, I mean, we had the tornadoes hit in Nashville, the pandemic hit. I think we all knew that, hey, this is the moment. This is because it's been a long time coming. One, we have margin to do it, you know, because no one in the world was traveling. But secondly, this felt like, when I think of Christmas this year, after the global suffering that we've all faced economically, politically, socially, and so on, and obviously the pandemic being kind of the core of all of that, we felt like this Christmas is going to be one of the great Christmases that we've ever experienced in our lifetime, because this was finally reprieve, and it's not to say we're out of the woods yet, but to celebrate the greatest news that the world has ever known felt very timely. So we spared no expense. And
I remember talking to you at CMA Country Christmas last year, and you had already been widely popular, but that Little Drummer Boy that you played at CMA Country Christmas last year kind of blew everybody's minds. It was for sure the highlight of that show. For sure. And then everything stopped. And how were you guys when you had even more momentum than you already had, and then everything literally just stopped?
First of all, little side note, yesterday, a year ago, was the day that CMA Country Christmas aired.
Wow. So and it really was the highlight of the show. People talked about it for months afterwards.
Well, we talked about this last year, but it was nerve-wracking, because there was that probably maybe a second and a half after the song where we kind of finished the song very abruptly, and it was like, and you didn't know if we were going to get like booed off the stage or if they were just going to stand and erupt in applause. And fortunately, it was the latter, not the former.
It was for sure the latter.
But yeah, tell you what, Gail, you're right. I mean, I think the whole musical community faced that, right? We were going, we had plans, we were moving and shaking, and then it was just like, globally, the brakes were pumped, not even pumped, were just slammed on. But I think for us, with like Dolly Parton and CMAs and the CMA Country Christmas, and we were very fortunate to go to the Grammys this year and win earlier in the year and win a couple of Grammys. It was like, I remember there was this moment, we were gearing up for our first Canadian tour, coast to coast in March. So right at the Good timing, right?
Yeah.
And I remember saying, we were at Belmont University in that arena there rehearsing. And I remember sitting in front of the band and the crew and just saying, hey, for the first time in our band's career, we've basically crafted a year of touring on our own accord. You know, you're always, when you're starting out, you're just going here, there, and everywhere. You're just taking every opportunity. And this year we really sat down and we were very methodical. Like, these are the 3 tours we wanted to do, and this is how we wanted to do them. And then, 4 days later, we're in Toronto, kind of singing the last notes in front of a live audience that we would raise basically for the rest of the year. So it has felt like that. It has felt like massive slamming on the brakes. But I do honestly have a little bit of survivor's remorse in it. I think because of their momentum and because of the already kind of having this Christmas album on the docket and some of the other things that we'd already kind of had in motion, touring was a great loss, but my great empathy and sympathy has not gone. It's gone to some of our people, obviously, because we've not been able to travel as much, particularly the road crew and so on. But it's really gone to the musical community. And I've had to ask myself at points, like, this survivor's remorse of, like, I've spent more time at home with my wife than, since we were married, and we got to work on this Christmas record, and we're getting to do these drive-in shows that are actually really charming. And so I go from feeling very grateful to feeling very guilty that we've had the year we've had.
But you have made a lot of the year that you've had, whereas some people, I think, froze. You guys didn't freeze.
No, for better or for worse, we didn't. Probably better and for worse, we didn't freeze. This Christmas record, I think Luke and I both knew we never wanted to just phone in a holiday album. There's such a thing these days where it's like, well, it's just what you do. You put out a Christmas record. And
they do well sometimes, often.
And they do well, yeah. And we would just visually, sonically, conceptually, we're like, that's just not it's not our MO. And so, Gail, we spent more money on this album than I think any that we've ever been a part of.
Wow.
We spent loads of money on the official music video for Little Drummer Boy and Heavenly Hosts, and really dove deep into the spiritual side of Christmas. Because at one point we were looking at, chestnuts roasting on an oil, like, the sentimental, have a holly jolly Christmas. And no judgment on those songs. I love them, but they just very obviously in 2020, and we were making the record right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was very obvious for us in 2020. It was like, you can't do that. Like, you have to dig into the real meaning of Christmas. And as a result, as well, it's become the most spiritual record that we've ever created, So we're very, very proud, but we haven't stopped. That is true. We stop on December. Well, we play Good Morning America on December 25th, and then actually it looks like we'll play it again on New Year's Day. We're gonna or New Year's Eve. We'll play Joy from our last record, kind of trying to helping Good Morning America usher in 2021. Not that they need help, but once we're done with those 2 appearances, then we're pretty much.
So I listened to the whole album when they sent it to me a couple times, but then this morning I get up at like 5 a.m. It's a sickness, but I love it.
Congratulations.
And I just sat and listened to it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I believe in you. I might have done this just a little bit. Give me the story behind that song. It's so few songs have been written from the perspective of Joseph, but also it felt so anthemic to me. Like, I believe in you. This year has been hard, but I still believe in you.
It's a hard thing to write a Christmas song if you're really in touch with yourself as a writer, because the facts are you're dealing with some of the most nostalgic, precious, historically rich pieces of music ever. And so it's a little presumptuous, to think, we can contribute to this beautiful catalog of classics. And then it's also, I think for us, it was like, oh, not only is it presumptuous, but it's daunting because you're kind of sandwiching. We've written we wrote more than two, but we put two originals on the record. And you're sandwiching them in between the classics as well. And so if they don't stand up, it's going to be very obvious, because you go out of, O Come, Emmanuel into Heavenly Hosts, or out of O Come, All Ye Faithful into, I think, I Believe in You, or Joseph's Carol. So it was very daunting, but what really helped us was we said, hey, who are some of the unsung heroes of the biblical story? And you said it well. Joseph, man, what a beautiful character in the story. Like, here's a guy who basically could have pressed charges against his wife for at least for getting pregnant out of wedlock. He could have left her alone as a teenager trying to work things out. And yet he did kind of the complete opposite. He honored her. He honored this census that was passed. He took her on this, which would have been a very frightful journey when she was very pregnant. And from what we know about his life, really became a great stepdad to Jesus Christ. And I put myself in his shoes, right in he's in the cave, he's in the stable, and all of the emotions of like fear for the woman he loves, bewilderment at this child, and like this angel's told me that who he is, but you always have that fear or like that speculation. And then just the very like human feeling of like, man, I failed. Like we couldn't even have him in a hotel. Like, what a failure I am. And then all of that just washing away and looking at him and going, oh my goodness. And in many ways, we felt like, which was such a fascinating thought, that Joseph was the first kind of Christian. He was the first believer in Jesus. Definitely the first man to believe in Jesus. And so it just became this beautiful thought that I think really, we were all emotional in writing it, or before we'd even kind of put pen to paper, because it was like, the thought was so profound. And then the final hurrah was this triangle between, you have, Joseph saying to Jesus, I believe in you. Mm-hmm. And you have Mary looking at Joseph saying, I believe in you. And just this beautiful sort of back and forth between them. It was a really lovely thought. I'm getting a bit emo talking about it.
It's such a powerful, like I said, I got very emotional this morning. As a man of faith, what is your message to people right now who are just struggling and have lost lives and have lost so much money and all of the things?
There's been some very hard lessons in recent history that have proven that greatness can come out of hardship. The most obvious one that we've faced that's very frightful is American slavery. And that I believe that there is a rise happening in particularly the African American community, in the Hispanic community. My wife's Hispanic, where they were so incredibly oppressed for such a long time. And there's such great loss, and that should be recognized, and there should be empathy and sympathy. And there should be, from those of us that don't share that common experience, there should be that rising up and being there and taking any kind of privilege we have and using it to influence and change the future. But strictly speaking, I believe that the African American community, through such loss and hardship, have risen and are rising. Another example, a very stark example, is Israel and the Jews. We forget that not even a century ago, they were brutalized and concentration camps and great loss. And yet, if it weren't for that great loss, you actually wouldn't have Israel as a sovereign nation today. So there's this, and the technology that they've contributed to the world. And it's tragic, but my point is that they rose out of it. And those are just two experiences. You have the African American community, and you have the Jewish community. But let's talk about the global community for a moment. For the first time in our lifetime, we have a global shared suffering. Does not matter your creed, your color, your affluence level, the country you live in, the language you speak, the religion you believe in. We have shared suffering. And I think there's a great opportunity in that. At Christmas, I think there's a great opportunity for us to, well, let me say this first. I think there's a great pothole that we could walk in, and that is, and we've all done it, and that is just get me back to normal. Just get me back to status quo. And then all of the loss of life, all of the economic, tragedy, all of the setbacks that we've had in equality and all the rest of it because of what's happened, then it was all a loss. But if we can channel this great loss and say, no. Let's get back starting at Christmas. Let's get back to the true heart of Christmas. I love Santa Claus. I love mistletoe. I love hot chocolate. But let's get back to the great hope of humanity. And then onward. No, let's not just get so obsessed with getting back to normal. Let's become more giving and more empathetic and more gracious. And let's lean into each other more than ever, and understand each other and understand different culture and different people's positions and belief. Like if you look at Jesus Christ in his life, which I've done a fair amount of study on, the guy was all ears. He would just listen to people and he would offer insight and wisdom, but he was so accepting, and we've lost that. I think we've lost that in the Christian community. And so I'm hopeful that it starts with the Jesus followers and sort of trickles out, but we'll get back to this just loving each other. That was the command, love God and love people, love your enemies even.
Awesome. That's a beautiful answer. And I think that's all I need, but I could literally talk to you all day. Why do we?
I feel that too. I need to get better. You think I've done this long enough. I need to get better at shortening my answers.
No, you don't.
Give you more.
No.
Give you more time.
Be you. It was great. Let's do this again in the new year.
I'd love that. We've got time. Luke's having a kid in the new year, and we're going to lay pretty low after going hard this year and kind of recalibrate a bit. So I'd love to connect.
Sounds good.
I'll have time.
Love
you too. Thanks for listening to the record and for
amazing.
believing in us the way you do.
It's really, 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 really amazing.